Awesome. Pleasure to have you.
Hello.
Hello. I'm Connor, and I met Laurel through a mutual friend just because you read 52 books this past year in the 2018.
Yeah, I think I actually ended up hitting 57, 58, but yeah, generally between 50 and 60 books a year.
And that was just the natural scale of your reading habit.
Yes, for the most part. Yeah, so I read pretty much when I'm on the bus or any form of public transportation. Also handy when I'm just waiting around for people in line at the grocery store, anywhere you can read if you have a phone.
You can pretty much
Kindle.
do it anywhere. Are you using physical books, Kindle, across-the-board audio?
So I mostly read on my handy-dandy Kindle Paperwhite. Hope I get an extra cut for this advertisement.
Nice.
Yeah, and I pretty much only get books from the library.
Okay.
So you can check out ebooks, same as you can with physical books. You only get 3 weeks per book, and then it automatically expires.
Right.
But loophole is, if your Kindle's in airplane mode, it doesn't know when the books are supposed to expire. So if you're not quite done when you hit the 21-day mark, you have a little bit longer. That's the loophole.
So are you reading for entertainment mostly?
Yeah, so I primarily read for fun.
Okay.
Mostly fiction, mostly sci-fi and fantasy. I try to throw in a few classics here and there, just for my own edification or for books that I feel like I've missed out on in high school or college. Occasionally I read some nonfiction, like pop psychology type books as well. And those are good for water cooler talk, but pretty much entirely read for my own fun, not for work.
And you posted I asked you my friends every year for a list of media they consumed during the year that they really liked. And so out of this slew, what was one of your top?
I think, so I said my favorite was this book called Caw, which is a book about a crow who gains immortality and lives through many centuries of human civilization, which is kind of weird, but yeah, I mean, I would say it's definitely fantasy and not sci-fi. It's kind of mythological. It's in that genre of books that I loved when I was a kid, which is anthropomorphized animals.
Right.
Like there was books about, of course, Redwall, but there was like books about like wolves, or one about red deer and unicorns. That was a fun one.
These are different books.
All different books.
Okay.
Yeah.
The anthropomorphized animal. I mean, that's a big section of literature.
That's true.
Like Warriors come to mind. Have you read those? It's all about cats.
Oh, wait, I know. Like feral or.
They're like wild
cats that went feral
and
wild.
The politics within their community.
And they choose like names, right? Warrior names.
I just know that they're written by Aaron Hunter, which I think is a team.
Is that really a real name?
I don't think so. And there are like, from what I want to safely say, like maybe 50 of these books.
Wow, prolific.
There are a ton, and people love them. But anyway, anthropomorphized animals, big. People love that. Less so in film. Well,
in film, you have to get around the issue of how to make the animals talk. Because you can either pull a Homeward Bound and just have the voices be talking, but otherwise, no lips moving, in which the viewer is left to assume that they're actually telepathic animals that can just speak to each other's minds. Or you have to actually animate the lips moving, like in the Jungle Book type films, which can get really uncanny valley if you do it wrong. Even if it's done right, it still looks unnatural because like a jaguar's lips don't move that way.
Yeah, can't really make sound. Out of all the, do you have like an end goal with all the reading, or is it all just like filling the time mostly?
Yeah, I pretty much started when I came out of college and started a real job and was taking the bus every day to work. And I said, finally, I've been through 4 years of reading textbooks and assigned books and writing essays and doing math.
Do that again.
And I was like, finally, I can just read for fun. And at first it was just like, okay, what were the books that were piling up on the list while I was not really able to, or I would say wasn't able to, but didn't prioritize in order to read them. So I started with those and went online, talked to my friends, got as many recommendations as possible. And out of that was born kind of this list that I keep of all the books that I want to read.
And I'm curious about this because people will often say that they have this list. Some people actually do. But from what the common thing is that people say like, oh, I'll put that on my list. And the likelihood of going through the list of books that you have is not likely, ever.
Yeah, I'm that person who, when someone is like really adamant, oh, you gotta read this book, it's great, then I actually pull out my phone and pull up my list and add it to the list.
Okay.
And what's funny enough is this happened to me not once, not twice, but a couple of different times when I have then actually read the book that was recommended to me by said friend, and I was like, oh hey, so like I loved blah blah blah, like what was your favorite part? And they're like, yeah, I didn't actually end up finishing that.
Oh my goodness.
So just a warning, if you recommend any books to me, I will call you out if you haven't read them.
That's fascinating to me because I have taken the stance because like as a book person, I worked in libraries and also at Pal City Books where everyone.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a great job because I'm on the floor.
Surrounded by books all
Surrounded by books every day. You can check out books like a library. It was
that's a nice perk.
It was incredible. And everyone you work with got hired because they know how to talk about books.
Right.
And so it got to a point where recommendations stopped making sense because you can't. Like, it's very hard to call the list. And also these conversations are kind of formulaic and they lead to nowhere. It's like, have you read it? Yeah, what did you think? And then, like, why the fuck are we talking about it? So I've recently taken the stance with books is that I am now completely pro-spoiler.
Ooh, please don't start that theory today.
And the rationale is, if I'm talking to a person, there are so many books out there being produced at such a fast rate that I'm going to have a better time hearing it from you than taking the time to actually read it.
I'll reenact the best parts for you, and then boom, and you get the viral bits. Don't have to actually read the thing.
Exactly.
Like, TLDR.
Right.
We're TLDRing books.
Which seems to be helpful. Like, is this something you'd be interested in, or like you seem kind of old school?
Like
and you kind of like really, you really don't.
Well, I'm anti-spoiler in general, not just for books, but for TV shows, movies, and whatnot. For the main reason that if the author wanted you to experience a story with the end at the beginning, and then you find out what happened and why, then that's how they would have written their story.
Right.
But if they didn't intend the story to be experienced, understood that way, then you shouldn't go around and subvert the author's desire for what the story should be and how it should be experienced, is how I think of it.
Right.
Plus, like, I just hate the feeling of someone like blurting out a spoiler or knowing what happens. I even avoid movie trailers in many cases.
Because of all the spoilers.
I just hate to have the wrong expectations for the story, and then I'm building up my mind like, oh, I remember that scene, like how are we gonna get there? Or like, oh no, such and such happens to this person, like how's that gonna come about? And then my mind is distracted by this comparison of the actual medium or book, TV show, whatever, to what my expectation was.
Right.
And then I'm constantly doing that comparison instead of actually enjoying the story for what it is.
So to fully enjoy it as the author intended,
I do at least.
You want to be subject to whatever is laid out in front of you as intended.
Exactly.
Do you, like, one example that I read recently is people know how Romeo and Juliet ends. Does that deter people from reading it? And like knowing the plot,
knowing what's gonna happen at the end. There's no twist that's waiting to be uncovered. This is
But it is generally like it's probably the most famous twist ever.
Luke, I am your father.
like all these people know this, and they're watching the films for like the entertainment value. I guess what it comes down to is you're reading books to go on this ride of like entertainment, and I am curious if there's a way to appreciate books beyond that, like once you've read a lot.
Yeah, and I think that what you were alluding to earlier with talking about books, like, oh, did you like it? Yeah, sure, great. It's kind of one of my criticisms with, I'll say, the online book community. Or at least maybe there is one that I just like haven't found it yet. But it seems to me that so much of that kind of post reading the book is just, did you like it?
It is good.
Rate it. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
5 stars.
5 stars, 3.5 stars. So it just becomes a rating instead of what it should be, which is to spark questions in the mind of the reader. Like, oh, maybe that's a different way of thinking that I hadn't thought about before. Or like, oh, I don't know that I actually agree with that. Or like, oh, there's all this symbolism and foreshadowing and, appreciating the devices of literature.
Right.
So all the dumb things we did in high school to dissect and deconstruct books, it seems like that's what's missing. There's not really a lot of analysis on books, and it's something that I do miss out on reading books just by myself for fun rather than in a structured way with a book club, for instance, which I also am part of.
Okay.
But getting that kind of that post-mortem, like, okay, now let's break it down. Let's just talk not just about the book, but what questions the book inspires, and lead into a larger discussion of how society is structured, or ethics, or whatever the questions that are raised.
Which ideally is the purpose of a good book.
Right.
Is that you should walk away like it rewires. Like, I think what I read recently is that stories.
You read on the internet, so it must be true.
It's stories are they kind of fall flat without an underlying message.
Right.
That they're like trying.
Otherwise, it's just popcorn, which is fine. It's like going to the movies. Sometimes you just want an action flick that you can mindlessly consume and then go home and forget about, and that's fine. Like, I'm not judging any type of book.
Intention of consuming.
Right. It's like movies or TV shows in that it's both an art form and entertainment and a product. So it depends on what you're in the mood for consuming.
Right.
Rather than appreciating. And you consume a product, but you appreciate art.
Right. And I think I used to think that, like, in college, like, I would do a lot of hard studying, or maybe at work, like, a lot of hard mental processes. And so
your brain was working hard.
Right. So the need for like popcorn literature is a result of that.
Absolutely.
But then if you're like super underserved most during the day and like not stimulated at all,
if you have a tedious, boring job or something,
then your desire for like really
intellectually stimulating
literature would increase.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely true. It's probably more helpful, easier to read a lot of fiction, for instance, if you do primarily like engineering or math or science, something that's analytical in your day job. Then you can kind of whisk away to fantasy lands, as opposed to perhaps people who are in more creative fields already find that side of their mind is exhausted by their day job, and maybe they might find it easier to read nonfiction and get a dry cup of tea.
I guess it just boils down to, like, art fulfills the spiritual deficit.
Whatever else we're missing in our lives, that's what we seek out.
Exactly.
As art.
Which makes it kind of difficult to understand, or maybe it simplifies it, the recommendations for people, because then you have to know the person and how they're underserved.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which
personalized recommendations based on like a vitamin deficiency.
Right. And I think that's like, it makes, I'm also a writer, and like writing because like you read enough and you're like, shit, I want to do this. It makes it very confusing because you need to know your audience. And often your audience feels like you're writing for other people who also think like you.
Right, and I think that's probably a trap that we all fall into, not just with writing, but with any kind of communication, is we assume that our audience or whoever we're speaking to is like us fundamentally and sees the world the way we do, and that's not true at all. And I think we maybe don't appreciate how differently other people see the world, which is, or hopefully should be, one of the great things about books, and specifically books written, from a first-person perspective, is that you can get inside the skin of somebody else and learn how that character thinks. And I think that that's one thing that distinguishes books in particular from other forms of entertainment, art, like movies and TV shows.
Very immersive.
Right, yeah. Instead of just looking at a character from the outside, you're actually experiencing the story from the inside. And I think a really good book, it's almost like you have to put yourself aside for a little while and become the character in the book and experience the world the way they're experiencing it, just for a little while.
Right.
But yeah, you immerse yourself literally in that character and become someone else.
Right.
For a
and
little
then
while.
The payoff of that is always like reading something where you can do that. That's usually feels great.
Yeah. And people like to point to the studies that have been supposedly done where reading fiction makes people more empathetic, or at least in testing situations. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think it's totally possible to consume fiction as entertainment and not really have it percolate down into your personality or your appreciation of the world. But I'd like to think that there's a grain of truth in that experiencing other people's stories from other people's perspectives makes you more empathetic in the real world and understand other people as being the protagonists of their own stories instead of just side characters in your own.
Right. In this vein, what do you think is the most responsible way for folk to create their reading lists?
Responsible way. Responsible in
Responsible in like considering the amount of time that we have to read.
Right.
Like,
which is limited
for
most people.
Yeah, most people do not have a lot of time to read. So if you're gonna like pick, like I want to say like maybe people read maybe five books a year.
Say.
Exactly. How? What would you like to see in people choosing these books?
I think that maybe, say one should be a socially responsible book. Maybe a book about race or class or injustice or something, to learn more about the world as it actually is and what are some of the injustices about it. Read a book that expands their mind and is something that they wouldn't normally try at all, that isn't in a genre that they would normally pick up.
So basically creating a strategy to be like, okay, I'm going to read 5 books, and I know that I value these things, and I hope that they fall into these
values.
values.
And then kind of pick those 5 books in such a way is that it's not just the same vein, the same book copycatted over and over again.
Right.
But that if you're saying, okay, if I can only commit a certain limited amount of time, I should pick what is it that I want to accomplish. It's like where do you get your news sources from?
Right.
Maybe say like, okay, well I want multiple perspectives and maybe I can only take so much of really depressing news, so maybe I'll only read one really sad book and the other ones can be more uplifting or whatnot.
So then do we abandon the recommendation list, or we keep it to inform our 5 per year?
I think keep the recommendation list for sure. And when you read a book that's recommended to you by a friend, I think you can learn something about that friend also.
Right. And that's sort of where I'm headed as well. There are 2 ways that I think about books now. I think about it as in terms of like consuming food. And you develop, like it gets you from point A to point B. You develop different tastes over time, and sometimes your like body or brain will demand a certain kind of stimulation. And trusting that intuition, I usually tell people like with media, just like treat it like surfing. Wait for the wave. If it feels good, just ride it. And that just comes from being overwhelmed with choices.
Right. How do you know what to do or where to spend your time? If you don't have a plan, you could just frivolously while it away surfing Reddit or something and not actually do something constructive or at least enjoyably, intellectually stimulating with your time.
I agree. I think the problem is, have you read Library of Babel by Borges?
No.
The concept is like an infinite library.
But I will put it on my list.
Yeah, it's a short story, and the idea is it's a library of every possible variation of text ever. So for each book that argues one thing, there's another book that argues the other, and it is fully infinite. And like anyone who tries to read all of it goes insane or dies before they're going to reach it. And some folks just like focus on a certain area. But like what you're saying about learning about someone through reading, the end goal, you're writing to communicate to someone, ideally. So like at the end goal, I feel like it's all about making connections. And if you're recommending a book, you probably just want to tell them something. You're like, you should read this. Why should I read this? And he's like, because this made me really sad, and I want you to understand that.
I want you to be as equally sad as I was.
I honestly, like that's, if someone recommends a movie, they're like, this movie wrecked me. I hope, like, it was such a moving experience for me. I want you to see this to go through this profound change that I have. Or at least
I don't want to suffer alone.
Right, exactly. So, like, I don't know where this leaves us because it's, and it makes me, like, kind of frustrated with why am I consuming art?
That's a bigger question about
why
do we need art and why should we want art?
I heard, like, it just helps us as a survival mechanism. It's just a response to, like, make our lives feel more enriched when they're not.
So get kind of the live vicariously through lives that we don't experience or
it's like
that we don't have access to in our regular life. Right, escapism.
And like, yes, some of them are like providing us information, but I don't even know what information is useful anymore. Right,
if you're not reading a book for work or that will directly impact a side hustle or something, then it's purely for fun, right? But if we're saying, but if it should be intellectually stimulating also, then it kind of in that gray area of it's for fun, but you also are doing it as a self-improvement exercise.
You see the problem here.
Right.
Now reading's not fun anymore.
Because it becomes a chore that you've been assigned.
And kind of stressful.
Right. Like you exercise. Why? Because it's healthy. Because you're supposed to.
Right.
Instead of playing a game that you actually enjoy that also happens to have the side benefit of burning calories, building muscle, and whatnot.
Right.
So how do you trick yourself into doing something that you consider a chore but also should be nominally for fun?
So as far as like building muscle is the benefit of like exercise. The benefit of reading perhaps is just mental plasticity.
Yeah, that also, if you're reading maybe more nonfiction, how to construct arguments, logic, reason, or how to evaluate arguments at least, how do you engage with worldviews other than your own?
I like
how do you
that
respond
a lot.
To that?
I think that reading definitely forces people to break down the steps of their thinking.
Right. Why do you think what you think? Not only identifying, one, what is it that I think? Because you might only at first have just a gut reaction to something. Say like, no, that's wrong. Or like, no, I don't think that. Okay, what is it that you think? What is your position? Define that first. And then break it down to, okay, why do I think that? Why are my beliefs what they are? And ultimately you'll distill it down to a set of fundamental core beliefs that at some point you have to say, well, I think this because I do. And be okay with that. And when
because
you
I've continuously broke it down
right,
through
it can't be any
one-way books.
Right.
This is good because it makes me feel a lot better. Because now I'm like, oh, okay, the reading does have a benefit.
I mean, certainly people could argue that just like watching movies.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes.
Okay. That just like with movies, you could do it purely 100% for entertainment and not be better at all. And I think there is that argument to be made. I still am maybe naive or optimistic enough to think that reading books, at least the right kind of books, and especially if you can engage with other people about those books afterward, that it can help clarify your own thought processes in your mind and help you understand more about yourself,
right,
as well as other
function
people.
A little more consciously.
Yes, I think so. Move through society with more intention.
To end, since we have a couple minutes, what, like, just because I like this, what is the weirdest book you've ever read?
Oh,
because we talked about Gertrude Stein before the camera was rolling. That shit's super weird.
Oh man, this year or ever?
Just, and it doesn't have to be of all time, but one that comes to mind.
One that comes to mind. Trying to remember the name of it now. Did you ever read in middle school? There's this book called Abarat. It was cool because the cover was, or the title was the same front and back, and or forwards and backwards. Anyway, yeah, right. That author, who I'm blanking on very terribly right now, wrote another book. It's more of an adult fantasy book, where our world is one of 5, but we can't normally access it. But this other world is full of like spirits and demons and regular people, but weirder.
No way.
And there's some weird sexual escapades that happen as well.
Okay.
But overall, I think the book is kind of an examination of like the body and what it means to be embodied, and that connection between the real and the symbolic.
Sounds
through
great.
the body. Yeah, it gets pretty weird, but in a good way.
Yeah,
weird.
I hope so. Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have. Thanks so much for meeting up and talking books.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we'll be able to meet again and talk more. And
Absolutely.
maybe a year
Get
from
some
now.
recommendations.
Yeah. Oh, no. Cool.
Save that for next time.
I don't know where Jaren went. So, like, my first reaction was I wanted to flip off the screen, but that's just me.
It's a bit childish.
Yeah, I know. That's me.
Okay.
I hope I don't accidentally delete it.
I would be too afraid to hit any buttons over there.
I know. I'm gonna get it.
Okay.